Alrighty. Hello, everyone. You're doing all right. Good to see all of you. So, a lot of you today on Monday. So we continue. Alrighty. Well, we have a few more joining us, so we'll take a minute, but we're going to dive pretty much right in. For those of you who've done the usual Wednesday sessions, well, it's not so different anytime. I use the term workshop this week, but I find I use the term workshop, all of a sudden people are like, oh, interesting, like a workshop. It's not just a meditation, but yet either way, we're gonna do the same thing every week. Been doing the same damn thing every week for the past 10 years. So it's funny, the use of words, right? But in truth, what are we really seeking? You know, when we come together, we're coming together for a sense of presence, sense of clarity, or a sense of renewal. Sometimes meditations are amplified when we're doing them in the group, but you know, in truth, we can get to the same level of expansiveness in our own time alone with ourselves. But it's always nice to come together. I did have a couple of particular topics that were flowing that I felt would be nice to explore today. Um, just some things that have been circulating that I've been observing, and the full moon we just had seemed to be a little bit, a little push to it, I guess you could say, or a little juice to it. I was having messages from a number of people that were kind of circulating around the same thing. And I actually have tended to, you know, maybe not do sessions as much during that time, or people want to talk and get things off their chest or something in that time. A lot of times I've actually opted away from doing that during the full moon times, because things are quite amplified, right? So often when things are amplified, we kind of make things more dramatic than they need to be, or we start looking for things to kind of take care of us during that time, like what can help me during this period. But in truth, it's actually such a beautiful time for being alone, being with yourself, right? Because it gives you that opportunity to really take responsibility for the things that are being amplified during the moon time. And also specifically, uh, it helps us actually have more clarity on the manipulation of thought forms and ideas, and the cycles that happen during the moon time. Things kind of keep cycling back, and it's very strong, it's very pronounced, and it can get very easy for the mind. It's very easy for the mind to attach to ideas, start overthinking about things, or start to give too much meaning to synchronicities, things that are cycling. Oh, that means I must do this, or, oh, that must mean this, and I'm supposed to do this. And, it kind of comes back to one of the topics I wanted to focus on today, which is kind of the shiny object syndrome, right? Shiny object syndrome is kind of like where the way I've often felt it is, it's like, it kind of feels like you don't have any center. And because you don't have any center, we're kind of, the tendency can be to kind of hang off everything that happens, every word that, someone you respect says, or every synchronicity that happens, or, every new technique or method or opportunity that comes your way. It's kind of like you're hanging off everything. Everything is kind of seemingly, the next best thing, the next thing. Like you're like, oh, you're like waiting for the next deliverance of some, great statement or meditation, or, I don't know, you go watch some full moon, forecasts, like, oh, this is going to happen. It's kind of, there's no real center. There's no sense of knowing or foundation. So everything is kind of more important than it needs to be. Everything that someone says, everything that happens, especially the things within the spiritual realm, are things that somehow have some sort of mystical importance. These things can become, it's very easy for these things to become shiny objects, because if we don't have a clear sense of ourselves, then we're much more willing to believe in the unknown, much more willing to believe in the things that we can't see, but somehow somebody else can. It's like, oh, they have some magical power and they can see through time. They can see me, like maybe I'll get them to maybe they can do a reading for me, and then they can tell me what I can't see already. These are a lot of the tendencies that I've been through, and I'm sure you all can relate, because these are the things that are most easy for the mind to go into. And anytime that it's easy, right? Anytime it's easy to just go on a 3-hour binge of watching spiritual videos, every time something's easy, you know that it's not it. Because the things that are going to require the effort are not going to be shiny, right? Like one of the simplest practices we could ever do if we're ever in a place of confusion is just to close your eyes, even keep the eyes open, and check in and feel what is most necessary for me to look at right now. What's most necessary for me to place my attention on, or what's most necessary for me to engage? And often that could be as simple as like, well, you didn't take out the trash this morning, or the dog's been like at the door, like wanting to go outside. So like maybe you gotta take the dog out. Or I don't know, like you haven't returned that phone call. You had a responsibility to return that phone call a week ago, never returned it. The consciousness, our consciousness is so intelligent and so efficient that it's not going to reach for some glamorous, shiny object, like, oh, I didn't do that like 12-strand DNA activation that I've been wanting to. Maybe that'll be it. But oftentimes you're going to get the simplest of things, the smallest of things, the things that are just necessary for your daily life to continue in a graceful manner. Because if you don't take out the trash, then the next week, in a couple hours, it's going to start smelling, right? Or if you don't return that phone call, in a week, they're going to be phoning you back, and then it's going to be kind of weird because then, you knew. These are the things that actually are what compound to create the lack of the sense of lack, the confusion, the suffering, all of the pain. These small little things. It's not like, oh, this grandiose thing that I seemingly feel like I have to do, that I'm not doing, and I feel so bad that I'm not doing it, and because I should be, because blah blah blah, I paid for it, or everyone else is doing that, or this is how tricky the mind gets, right? And especially in a time such as the time we're living in now, where it seems like things are so urgent, right? Like I gotta catch up, I gotta awaken, I gotta heal, I gotta fast, I gotta detox, I gotta blah 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 blah. But the reality is, all of those things only happen, like every big thing that the mind thinks is going to happen only happen by a bunch of very small steps. And all of those small steps, none of them are glamorous. None of them are some like big grandiose thing. They're actually so simple. So when we tune in, right, and we come to that silence and we just listen, what is actually necessary? What is necessary? What is necessary? What does that mean? Like what does it mean to like just live and do what's necessary? This is something that I feel like is grossly overlooked. And just like the famous quote in I don't know what tradition, maybe it's Taoist tradition, but before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water, right? What does this mean? Well, I think we know what it means, but what it actually means, really, if we really come into it, is drop all of the fantasy tales about what you think awakening is, what you think healing is, what you think peace is, what you think enlightenment is, freedom, all of these catch terms and concepts. These concepts really have no real usefulness to you if they're going to pull you away from the simplicity of what it means to awaken, which is to awaken to, like I just said, what is necessary, doing what's necessary. If you got to chop wood and carry the water, then you got to chop wood and carry water. It doesn't matter if you're enlightened or not, right? It doesn't matter if you're this grandiose avatar or not. It is still necessary for you to take care of what's necessary, right? So let's we're going to go into meditation. We're going to get really simple with ourselves and really restful so that we can more easily tune to this, because the only reason we're not able to tune to it is because in the times of suffering or times of challenge, we often equate the level of and degree of suffering with the size of the action that must be taken. Like if we're in the depths and depths of our despair, we think we need to take this grand action, this gigantic set of steps to somehow get us out of this. But in reality, sometimes it just requires us to get up and go take a walk, for 20 minutes and in the sun, and all of a sudden, all the problems of the day just kind of slowly go away. And you're like, well, wait a minute. I thought I had to do some big thing to take care of this. So it's so easy for us to forget that when we're in that place, and especially again when we're in this collective scenario that's seeming so urgent. There's so many things we got to do. There's all this stuff happening in the world. It doesn't change anything. There's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. The same principles that bring us peace at one time will always bring us peace, right? It just sometimes it's in different combinations, different different sequence, you could say. So before we get any deeper into some of the topics, we'll just take some time to come into this, a little meditation, and yeah, we'll see what's there. So we can get comfy, and when we're ready, we can close the eyes and just bring the attention here. We're not necessarily bringing the attention inwards or bringing the attention outwards, because it's all happening here anyways. All the sensations of the mind, thoughts, feelings, sensations of body, they're all happening here. Wherever here is, or whatever here is, it's happening right here as it is. And so we can tune to the frequency of just being okay with all of this, however it's appearing. What freedom in that, where just for this moment, just for this space that we're here, we don't need to control what's happening or manipulate it, make it better, change it in any way. It can just be exactly as it is. Even the thoughts that somehow combat that and say, well, no, it has to be different, or I can change it, or let's make it better. Everything can just continue to remain and rest as it is. So it's like we're not attaching to some sort of stream or storyline of thought where we are somehow on this ride of all these thoughts that are connected together. Every thought is happening independently within themselves, spontaneously within itself. It's not attached to any other thought. Everything's arising and then naturally falling away, completing itself. And then a fresh new moment is arising once again with a new series of thoughts or perspectives, feelings. And so when we're not connected in this way, when we're not feeling that everything's on this continuity, this story of the me, the personal me that we think we are, then everything actually can be and already is complete within itself because it's not connected to anything else. So we're not dragging along stories and these long ideas and attachments to things, expectations of where we're headed, or hopes and dreams of the future, or regrets and guilts of the past. And this can expand infinitely in every direction, where everything's encapsulating within this perfection, this perspective of perfection, state of the world, our relationships, people who are important to us or not important to us, different situations in our life, or fears of the future, desires, hopes. Anything we can conceive is encapsulated within this perfection. But whether something happens or it doesn't, whether someone changes or they don't, whether certain circumstance resolves or stays the same, we're completely okay with everything simply being as it is. So we just keep coming back to this natural freedom to just simply take care of what's before us. There may be particular subjects or topics or certain task that keeps coming to mind, that is something that we can take a look at, something that we can focus on, something that's important to us. but nothing carries any particular weight, because the weight is only perceivable because of its connection to a future outcome or a past circumstance, some aspect of karma. That's what in truth is bringing the weight of expectation, the weight of attachment, the weight of desire, the weight of fear, the weight of outcomes, stories, traumas. This is all bound within time and within the illusion of the me, the personal me that's attached to all these things and interwoven within the web. But if we are just simply here as this isness, this emptiness, this spaciousness, then we're not bound by any of these solid ideas, stories. None of it is who we are anyways. And so we can see all the necessary tasks on the to-do list, or the desires, or the things that we feel so urgently have to get done or that we have to take part in. We can see that underneath all of those, is that desire really true? Is it truly necessary? Is it really for us? Or is it coming from this sense of lack, the sense of urgency, the sense of suffering, this traumatized sense of self, this unworthy sense of self? And so from this lens of perfection and absolute worthiness, absolute love, divine love, we can see that things simplify. What is necessary to be done or to focus on is often quite small compared to what the mind had conceived, far less important, far less urgent. There's a peace, there's a patience that emerges here. So we can just come to rest in that for a few minutes, maybe even breathe into it, feel it in the heart, the natural restfulness. So this peace we can feel just naturally moving through every cell in the body. It may even move into the desire to move the body. You feel called to move the body a bit, or kind of just explore yourself a little bit. And it's almost like the expansiveness of this peacefulness has no bounds. So it expands eternally in every direction, and you can feel it expanding eternally in every direction. Almost like it has a life of its own, where it's moving through the body with an intelligence to kind of clear out any buildup of energy or tension, feelings of anxiety, buildup of emotion. And that can be done on its own. It's not even something that needs to be consciously engaged. It's already been activated. It's more so a process of a surrender, getting out of the way. And sometimes the breath can just expand that, where you can breathe into particular regions of the body and direct that energy, but even that's not always necessary. It's more so a surrender within every sensation, every micro sensation, every trillions and trillions of sensations, thoughts, feelings, all happening simultaneously. It's like you're surrendering to all of them. Because as there's an expansion into all of them, you see that you can't actually control all of them anyways. To think that you control the thoughts that arise, or you control the feelings or the sensations, this is just illusionary. This is the delusion of the lower ego that thinks it's in control. So surrendering to that truth, to that reality, this is actually where everything comes to rest, where the lower ego can dissolve, and then we come into the higher mind, the higher self, that's able to very easily sort through all of these thoughts, feelings, sensations, and to see which ones are of most importance, which ones require conscious attention. And so if you can imagine this entire field of consciousness, this entire field of energy that you are omnipresently aware of, all timelines of yourself that exist simultaneously, we can see that when we come into a pure intent of asking the question, what's necessary for me to look at, what's necessary for me to focus on at any one time, or just simply diminish or dissolving that intention altogether and simply resting in the silence of this, what only arises is what's most important. Just like if you had your hand on a hot plate, the only thing that would be important would be to take your hand off the hot plate, because that sensation would be most strong, most obvious. So when we rest in the silence, what will be most obvious is that in which is of the highest joyfulness, what is fostering a deeper sense of love and compassion, what's continuing to expand we could say almost momentum of this continuity of joyfulness, compassion, peacefulness, equanimity, balance, harmony. This is only what's ever important. So often it's actually so easy to see what will continue to foster this, to sit at ease within the body, to be in a conscious state with the breath, to speak with people with compassion, to eat a meal with presence and reverence, maybe work on a project with focus, discipline, perseverance, to serve those who are hungry, those who are in need, those who have no shelter, those who are in suffering or pain or fear. These are always what are of most necessity in our life experience. So it's really not so complex. And when we drop all the ideas of what the mind thinks this looks like, this is where we can be very clear on listening to what our life is speaking to us, what it's revealing about where we're placing our attention, where we're placing our energy. So as this silence and this peacefulness expands in its strength and it's in its perceivable size, it's like you could feel the presence of the peace and the silence within a very small little bubble, like a little igloo, we could say. But then what if the peace and the silence is as big as an amphitheater, a million, 10 million person amphitheater, where it is only you, and the weight of this silence and this spaciousness and this peace is felt viscerally, like you'd be in a million person amphitheater, completely alone, completely silent. So if you imagine this bubble, this amphitheater as your anatomy, as your template, this is essentially what we're navigating through our healing, is we're navigating through our template so that we can bring our template, our anatomy, to a sense of silence, so that the vastness of our bubble, of our template, which is much larger than a million person, an amphitheater, is silent. It is felt as silent and harmonious. and peaceful within the entirety of the bubble. So the more concrete that our intention is of this, the more this is our focus, the more we'll be able to see and perceive the contrast of when our template or our anatomy is in a very deep sense of chatter or noise or distraction, or when there's too many other energies mixing within our template, too many other beings or entities, energies, collective spaces, energies. These are things that we have to consciously clear and be the custodian of. Because if not, it's very easy for us to get lost within that noise, that chatter, taking it on as our own. So rested in the silence, we can just connect to ourselves. Some of us may feel complete here. It's fine. If we do, then we can explore the body or open the eyes when we feel. But some of us may feel called to continue in this. This is an exercise often that can be done, obviously, alone, because that's where we can really start to sense our own timing with this, and yeah, just not be in a group field, which is a bit different. But we can take our time with that. And if we do feel called to share in the chat how that was for us or what we're perceiving, feel free. I'm going to share a couple more pieces on this because it's quite a profound practice. I didn't expect it to go in that direction at the end, but this is something that's that I've explored for many years in regards to perceptual awareness of the bubble, if you will, right? Because when we think of our auric field, I'm going to pull up a picture actually to give a bit of a reference from the Chelonic science diagram. Yeah, I have it here. So I'm just going to show you guys this diagram. So this diagram is a diagram that shows the universal light force currents in the auric field of our 15-dimensional human anatomy, or our template, energetic template, right? So we have 15 chakras, and there's 15 dimensions, and there's 15 auric layers. Each of them are intertwined with each other. So when we're coming into the perception of our bubble, we are going through these layers. And over time, as you develop a certain energetic subtlety, which some of you obviously are developing and have developed, you will start to be able to perceive these perceptual layers. You'll literally be able to feel them because they do have a certain diameter, which can vary from person to person, but it'll be similar. And they have a certain color that you also be able to visualize or perceive. And they will have a certain feeling sense, certain energetic feeling sense, right? And the farther you go out, the more subtle they are, and the bigger they are, right? Like when I'm speaking of this idea of like a 1,000,000-person amphitheater, I mean, this is pretty small in comparison to what we're dealing with the auric layers, right? We're dealing with layers of ourselves that are vast to the point of being as big as the universe itself. So, you know, these are vast structures we're talking about here. But for the purpose of what we were exploring, when I'm saying, okay, we're going into our bubble and we're seeing it, does our bubble feel like it's in a bunch of chit chat? You know, this constant chit chat, constant chatter of the psychic chatter of the mind, chatter of the energies, or does it feel perceptually clear? right? Does it feel like when we sink into our bubble, we feel the spaciousness, we feel the weight of that peace, right? The weight of silence. Like when you're in a forest, you're in a forest in the winter, and you sit in that forest in the winter and you feel the weight of the silence, right? Because everything is at peace. It has a blanket over it that's brought it to peace, right? So, we have to be able to perceive, is this the case? And what we'll tend to find is that as we go about our day or our week or a month or whatever, and say we are or are not, paying attention to this, or we are or we're not, being a custodian of our own energy. Well, we may find ourselves in spaces where we go to close our eyes or we go to tune in and we start to feel all these workings of energies and, enmeshments and things and interactions, or stories that are still playing from a conversation that's gone unresolved, or, I don't know, you come back from an event and all of a sudden you're feeling all these energies and stuff. Well, it's like, yeah, because, everything we do in some form, we're interacting with different energies, right? We're interacting with different beings, different people. So, this is of course why, like, when we come into the path and we're becoming more adept in our tuning to our subtlety, to the energies that we interact with each and every day, we will want to naturally be more cognizant of who we spend our time around, how much time we spend with that, the energies we interact, our exchange of energy, right? In regards to, value exchange, money exchange, creative energy exchange, right? All forms of interaction become an energetic dynamic, an energetic exchange dynamic. So, often this type of practice that we did here is going to bring things up really clearly, right? Where when we come inwards, we can really see where our energies are. Sometimes whenever we even perceive ourselves in the body, sometimes it's like crooked, aspect of our soul body is crooked, or we find like we're not in the body, maybe we're like outside the body, or there's certain things like holding weight in different certain areas. So this is like just like, if it was like, I don't know, like a bug on your hand, like you'd feel the bug on the hand, so you'd be able to perceive it and do what you want to do with the bug, right? Or if you had anything on you, your body, or inside the body, like, some of you are in the detox program, which I'd highly recommend, even though we're finishing up, to go back if you want to register and just watch all the recordings, because there's so much value in that. And again, that sets the stage for the internal workings, right? The base level, which is the internal workings of the organ system. If your organs aren't clean, like we were talking about in Monday's session, you go to the bathroom, you're going to clean like all the stuff off the toilet. You're not going to leave just a little bit off, So when you're cleaning the inner organ systems, you're going to want, when you really get into this, you want to clean out everything, because everything that's in there, especially things that have been in there for 10, 20 plus years, that's going to be communicating in your field. Just like when we're dealing with auric layers, well, boy, we don't even need to look at the auric layers. Let's look at first, like, the physical body, what's in the organ systems, what's in the blood, what's in the lymphatic, what's in the lungs, what's in the brain, what's in the nervous system, because if there's a bunch of stuff, old stuff in there rotting away, that's communicating to you, right? I've often spoken about like the 3 brain theory. We have a brain in our head, brain in our heart, brain in our gut, but there's a 4th brain. That's the cellular brain. That's the brain that's communicating all the cells communicating simultaneously. So when you have stuff all throughout your body, that's creating all these little schisms, all these little miniature schisms within the psyche that's communicating on a regular basis. That's how we're processing our sensory, our thoughts, our feelings. It's processing through this mechanism that if it's not clean, just like if your car is not clean or anything, well, we know what happens, right? So it's vitally important that this is taken into very serious consideration, and a playful consideration, because it is playful too. But it doesn't feel so playful when we're pulling out the stuff out of our body, or when, again, you close your eyes and you're wondering, oh, why are my thoughts a bit weird? And I remember times like, and this is why I don't do any energy healing work or anything like that anymore. I only teach the methods that I've used so that you could do it on yourself. And that's because I remember so many times, doing energy work with people, and then, you go into into a perception, a meditation or something, and then you start to see all the webbings and things that you've just taken up from working with different people, And that's not something I want to do any longer at a certain part of my journey. I just kind of dropped it. But anyone who's done any energy work at all is going to be able to very clearly see that. And of course, there's ways to clear it out, but at a certain point, you kind of get real with yourself about how much you really want to still be doing that. And I think at this time that we're living in right now, less is more in that regard, right? Because we have to be clear about what are we really feeling, like we started with today. If you notice that aspect within yourself where, again, like it's like you're hanging off every word that some teacher, some, teaching or some system or something's providing, or, you're just going about your practices, going about your routine, day by day, and then you learn something new, and all of a sudden it's like you just drop everything, and now it's like, oh, it's this. I gotta do all this. I gotta make sure I'm doing this practice. These are those tendencies that are arising when we don't feel like we have a center, when we have not come into clear connection to our center, right? And in a time where there's so many distractions and attempts for coercion, attempts for consenting to things that you may not actually want to be consenting to, or agreeing to things, or going along with the narrative of whatever's happening in the world that isn't really true. Well, how are you going to know if it's really true or not if there isn't a clear sense of centers, a clear sense of ground of what you know to be true? That often is not complex at all. That's one thing that is very tantalizing about the glamorous objects of the external, is that it's always more complex than what you know. That's always how the mind justifies it. The mind always justifies having to do something more epic than what you're already doing, because in some way what you're looking at is more complex than what you know. It's out of your range. It's out of what you have the capacity to understand. So it must mean that it's more epic than what you're doing. It must mean that it's somehow convincing for you to kind of go down that path, right? So we could look at it in the traditional narrative right now, where the normie crowd doesn't know shit about health. So anything that the Dr. Fauci or something like this says, well, they just believe that must be it, because their belief is they don't know anything about health. The doctors know things about health. So, right. But in the spiritual space, it happens just the same. Oh, the guru or the master teacher or the one, they have this knowledge, this complex knowledge. It's just so amazing. And we have to be humble. Like, humility is a beautiful thing, right? So it's so important that we listen. But if we find ourselves like hanging off everything, or feeling like everything has to change now because we heard this new piece of knowledge and now we got to go on this new path, I mean, once again, like, if we just come back to the true master guru, which is our path, our individual path that we're already walking, that our feet are on the ground already walking, then all we have to do is just come to a very clear tuning in and sense what's most necessary for me right now. What is something, what in those times of confusion, or in those times where don't know what you do with yourself, or you're bored, or you're feeling overwhelmed, or the moon comes and all of a sudden it's like shaking up all this stuff. Again, when we just take a breath, when we just slow down, we just come back, like, what is really most necessary for me right now? Oh boy, it's often just so simple. It's so simple, so much more simpler than the mind makes it out to be. Things that are just naturally accessible, right? It's like, well, yeah, I could go up Mount Everest, but I could also just take the first step right now, like just down the street. You know what I mean? Like, just go on like a 10-minute walk. I want to walk up Mount Everest, but if I just take a 10-minute walk, that may actually be enough, truthfully, you know? So the mind always likes to create like these bigger images, these bigger fantasies of what we think is necessary. And the funny thing is it has truth to it, because the mind's not basing that off of nothing. It's basing off something. It's just that the mind often has this tendency, if it's not integrated, right? We're not feeling that clear sense of ground, and feeling a clear sense of ground often means we can see truth, and we rest within a very clear balance of intuition and logic, right? Because it's common for the seeker who has lived their whole life through logic to then deny logic just for the experimentation of intuition and the flow, and all those other side of things. But that in itself also becomes another trap, because logic is a beautiful thing, right? Having sound logic is a very beautiful thing. And we see this, let's say, in like conspiracy crowds, people have just lost their mind in conspiracies and they think like their fucking neighbor is a part of Illuminati or something like this. It's just it's the tendency of the extremes. So when we come into a balance, and the balance is an integration within the masculine feminine polarities within our own being, this is how we can navigate in a place of true harmony, right? Where we are living through sound intuition as the foundation, right? The true guide, the master, the feminine master, the feminine, the leading from the back, which is the feminine essence. But that's leading through a sound logic, a clear logic, right? Where we can deduce things, with basic logic, basic rationale, and then walk our path, accordingly, right? And again, that often provides for things that are much more, much less dramatic in regards to the steps we have to take on the path, right? Because again, it's very easy to get into the drama of things, and I got to do this drastic thing, and again, all drastic steps, all big steps are going to be a product of a lot of small steps. So if we just keep coming back to that, you'll find that less and less will you even be concerned about these big ideas, big thoughts, big dreams, big fears, big worries, timelines. Where's this world going? I feel like that's probably the most important message in regards to the navigation of this next 6 months, because in my view, I feel things are still going to kind of peak in different ways in regards to agendas and, just things that may be challenging at times, right? So what are we to do when it seems like it's such an insurmountable topic or an insurmountable navigation in regards to some of the things that are going on? At least I feel like most of us may have already felt like a tide shift. It does feel like things are shifting on some level, but I think we need to be very humble and patient with it as well, because we're dealing with a multi-million year process here. Like the momentum of these plans that are in place is nothing short of a Star Wars movie, and it's millions, if not billions, of years of momentum. So if we think in just like 6 months to a year, things are just going to kind of get good and everything's going to be fine, I feel in our individual world, we certainly can create that bubble for ourselves, just like we can at any time. But we have to also be humble to where the collective is at too. And I think it's much farther along than we may give it credit at sometimes, because it's just remarkable to see how many people are awake right now. But at the same time, again, if we get too much into the complexities of big choices that we have to make, this is where the pressure of that overwhelm that often brings stagnation, or brings freezing, that tendency to freeze up from the anxiety, or too many things in the mind, too many choices, feeling all these decisions, all these ideas of what could possibly be done. Again, when you come back to the simplicity of listening, right? If we just listen to reality and listen to what's naturally arising, it's often just so simple what's to be done, what's to be acted upon, what's to be focused on. And the core of it really is just focusing on ourselves, right? Like focusing on navigating ourselves so that we have come to a balance of well-being and peacefulness and a direct knowing of the love in which we are consistently. Like if that's not consistent for us at any time, then we got work to do, right? And the work is not necessarily in going around and trying to save the world and help all these people and all that. Again, that may be part of what's necessary, but for the most part, we have to really take care of ourselves and realize how important and how much time, how much energy, how much awareness it requires to really stay focused on just this being, let alone a couple others. And obviously, we have dependents, some of us, we have children, we have partners, we have family members. So we have to be, again, doing what's necessary, not what Corey says or what is some idealistic idea, what's necessary. And to be honest, that just starts and ends a lot of times with our basic needs, right? Like if we just focus on making sure our basic needs feel okay, because at the core, we could say that the majority of the population, including many of us here, are still dealing with basic like root chakra topics, because so much of the energy of trauma in these human bodies are held within dimensions 1, 2, and 3, within the initial 3 chakras. That's why it's such a common thing for the new ager, the seeker, to be bliss chasing all the time, because it's easier actually to bliss chase than it is to do the deep and shadow work, to go into those lower 3 chakras, because most of the suffering, trauma, and pain is going to be stored there. So that's the last place that any of us really want to go, but everyone here, like, just being here, obviously this is a focus, and it's a desire of truth to come and resolve that. But one of the ways in which this over complexity in the mind that we've come into is coming from this place of it's not even just on a conscious level, but within the actual schema of our psyche, the depth of our energetic workings. The difference between needs and wants or desires is still very construed. It's like there's all these different webbings there. Because if we really get to the basis of what we need to survive, it's really not that much. Anyone who's done any sort of fasting or anything like that, a less is more attitude with life in general, that often becomes very clear that we don't actually need as much as we think we do. But if we're still unraveled within the sexual traumas, which is often very combined with the money traumas and all of that, these are all kind of interwoven into these blown out of proportion desires, right? That create schisms within what is actually viewed as necessary because of those wounds of unworthiness, not feeling loved, not feeling safe in the body. So then there's the desire for more, right? So that's what creates a lot of the complexity, because when the world that we're dealing with right now is being threatened, and a lot of the basic needs and things are starting to be questioned, like what happens if there's a food shortage, or power goes out, or we're on the grid and we don't have a VaxPass, or all these different combinations. That starts working in with these false illusionary desires, where we're not actually afraid of surviving. We're afraid of not fulfilling the expectations of who we think we're supposed to be, of what society thinks we should be, of what our daddy or mommy wants us to be, or what our traumas want us to be, what our unworthiness wants us to be, what our lack wants us to be. This is really the true fear, right? Not the desires of basic needs and survival, because to be honest, that's not really that complex. If we really, really get to that with base logic, like we can easily deduce that with base logic. You just get out a pen and paper and start looking at things. You start to see, well, yeah, it's actually not that difficult to survive. Like, we're adults, we can figure it out, right? But the psyche, the emotional body, the lower chakras that are wounded in different ways, they don't work with just logic. Just logic is not going to deal with that properly. They're going to be like, well, that's great, but I feel very different, right? My body feels like constant in fight or flight, or I'm feeling anxious, or again, I'm cycling these expectations that I've had of myself. That's really, mom or dad that kept driving that down, or these different things, right? So there's many different layers we're speaking about here, but I hope this makes sense, even though we're not getting into it so much today. But this is actually the purpose of the next course program that we'll be doing. We start with the food because it is the foundation, but getting into the trauma work, shadow work, that's what we're going to be doing next in a couple of weeks. Because in my view, it's very important, actually. And it just so happens that it's focusing on these chakras and stuff. Yeah, it's just kind of funny, but that is the foundation, right? So when that healing happens, and as that healing happens, we feel safer in the body. We feel more worthy of our own love. We feel more intimate with ourselves, our creative energy. One of the notes I took today, and we kind of went into it in the meditation, which was, if we're looking at, let's just this idea of doing what's necessary, coming back, what's actually necessary. Oh, just take a walk today, or just get this one project done today. You've been putting it off, or something like this. Call this friend, or like these basic little things that each day we naturally just can come into. Well, if we haven't moved through the pains of, let's say, our own unworthiness, maybe a sense of unworthiness is pretty, but the primary lack, I did a good video on that recently, this primary driver of lack that kind of fuels a lot of the movements of desire, a lot of the actions, or any other desire that we have in our day. If we take some more time with this desires, we often can uproot what is the actual desire behind this, right? So we kind of did this in the food course where we were talking about, if we're feeling a certain desire or emotion, we often are going to feel a certain type of craving. So when we want to eat a certain type of thing, often that's going to be fueled by a certain emotion. So we're not actually hungry, even though we can convince ourselves, oh yeah, I'm hungry for this, I need this, but really we're actually hungry for the emotion. So we're eating our emotion. So we can do this essentially with everything, right? Where, I don't know, we may be feeling a sense of boredom, right? Feeling a sense of boredom. So you think, oh, well, I'm bored, so I want to go hang out with this person. Or I'm bored, so, I think I got to take a trip, right? Or whatever. I'm bored, I got to watch this show, or I'm bored of this. But in truth, when we actually start to get honest with ourselves to see, oh yeah, I want to go do that, but really the only reason I want to do that right now is because I'm feeling bored. So what if I just drop the desire for a moment and just actually go and feel the boredom, like to go into and experience the depth of this emotion that I'm feeling right now. Okay, so I feel that. All of a sudden now, usually when I do this exercise, if I ever do it, it's almost immediately that when we come into that emotion, we come to that feeling, a new desire pops up that's completely different than the one before. And sometimes you can do this process actually a couple times before you actually get to the core of the matter, right? Where, oh, I'm bored. I really just wanted to sing. I just wanted to sit here right where I am and just sing, you know? Or I'm feeling bored and I wanted to draw, or I wanted to, start writing, or I wanted to, I don't know, do something I haven't been doing for a while, or something I've been putting off. But really, when we take the time to actually feel into the emotional energy, this is what alchemizes it into a more truer representation of the desire that's actually there, or the movement of the energy, and what's the path of least resistance. Because yeah, we could say, well, I could get up and go on that trip, and that may, certainly it's probably going to deal with that boredom. But when we're looking at like the path of efficiency, the universe is always working law of efficiency. It's always going to be the highest path to come more intimately with that true desire, the more authentic desire, instead of the image that the mind will present based on what it knows best, right? It's like, oh, you're bored, well, eat some chips, or you're bored, just go and do something entertaining, or and it's not that those things are wrong. There's nothing in any of those examples that I gave was wrong. It's just saying that when the more intimate you come within yourself, the more you see how little, if at all, you need anything externally whatsoever, because you're seeing that the only thing we're truly desiring is the movement of our intimate energy, right? The movement of our own creative force that wants to express through the music and the art and the projects and I don't know, all the things, all the ways that we can create, which is an infinite amount of ways, right? And like I said, all those other things are ways in which we can create. So there's nothing wrong with any of those. But I find that this is a really beautiful exercise, and I would encourage it, right? To really start to look at, oh, well, what is this energy right now actually saying about the desire of what I want, or what I think I want, right? Because we can often come to it far quicker than with the mind. The mind always creates these elaborate plans to deal with the emotion, right? When really energy, emotion just wants to move, and it can move right here, exactly where we are. It can move through our voice, through our intention, right? Through our own faculties, our hands. Work with your hands a little bit. Do make something. I don't know, right? But yeah, this is something I constantly have to be reminded of in my own journey, having walked the monk path for a very long time. So creative things and moving in creative ways hasn't always come so naturally, as I've, essentially forced myself into heavy amounts of discipline with meditation, all that. But it's always important, keep that balance, especially in these times, right? Because the more we progress, the more the lockdown of creative energy will be there. And that's exemplified in two very basic forms, the lockdowns that many of us have been in, and also the masks, right? The lockdowns are going to lock down our ability to create with others, to move that intimate energy, right? It's less ability to keep the cycles of the creative energy moving. And then the mask is the other way that our creative force is limited, right? Because what is the primary way that our creative energy moves? It moves from the sacral, and then it connects out through the throat, right? The creative word, our ability to speak, to sing, to intend, to bring our word into creation, sound into form, right? So the mask, the muzzle, is the perfect symbology for the limiting of our creative force and our creative energy, right? So wear your masks whenever you need to practically do it, but just understand, like what is the deeper esoterics behind what we're dealing with, right? It's also obviously connected to the I can't breathe statement. What a beautiful synchronicity in 2019, 2020, where you have the I can't breathe of the BLM, and then you have the I can't breathe, literal I can't breathe of the wearing of the mask. It's all, and even if we are not to get into things like Illuminati and overarching overlord plans and all that, even if you put that aside, all of these things esoterically will always speak, right? The symbology, the metaphors of everything in the matrix is happening in code. So everything is happening already. It doesn't need some master planner there to manipulate it all. It's going to speak already because it's just mirroring to us our own wounds, right? It's speaking to us the collective energetic buildup that is now manifesting in form, and it has been for a very long time. So, it's just good to be aware, right? Good to be aware. So I'll take a break there. I went on quite a spin. Maybe if there's questions or comments or whatever, you can unmute or you can type in the chat. I'll leave it open. I'll also check my notes. Oh yeah. So this is something that I was reflecting on. I have been reflecting on this for a little bit, and I did want to bring it up because I think this group is a great group for this. Not every group is because it's a sensitive topic, but it's on the topic of just like male and female roles within this time. And I'm going through a couple of different synchronicities myself, as I also felt like I walked this path a lot of the past 10 years. Much of my upbringing, my early years, I was actually a very feminine boy. I was very small, very tiny, very empathetic. And then I went through a phase that was extreme on the opposite end, the martial arts and the just all of the above, the desire for status and power and money and business and, all the things, right? So there was a very extreme masculine phase that moved, and this often happens. It's males usually go through it early, and then later come into more yin or feminine energy, whereas females generally will go through the feminine essence cultivation, and then they'll move more into the masculine essence cultivation their later years. But anyway, so this is what had happened for me, and then getting into the spiritual space, you kind of get quite soft in many ways, right? Quite soft, and that softness can go into another extreme, where the softness takes on very strongly this feminine or female attributes that actually act as a diminishment to the true masculine essence that wants to express itself. And in our society and culture right now, even though at the fundamental layer we have an awakening of the feminine, this has been co-opted within a lot of the feminist movements to kind of create men out of women, sometimes literally, not necessarily out of alignment with the true soul essence, but as an idealistic expectation. So this is where we start to get in a lot of mix-ups with male and female roles in our society, because of not only are we already confused because of the energies that are healing within us, but then the agendas that come on top of that create all of the extra, distortions. And this certainly has found its way within the spiritual communities, because we find it again, it's the same energy of trying to make women into men and men into women without respecting the true soul essence of the being that will decide that anyways. And if we're already in a particular body, a male body or a female body, there will be just naturally, based on the physiology, a natural resonance to one of the polarities. It's just basic biochemistry. It's basic neurology. It's the way these bodies function. So we cannot diminish this, and we should not diminish this. Now, as we're healing, because the funny thing is that when a man ends up becoming more of like a beta man, or a man that at the core is actually quite masculine, but because of the repression, and particularly because of the wounds on the feminine essence of themselves, they suppress their masculine energy, and they look to essentially live out this feminine essence that is not truly integral to them. And this is where a lot of issues in relationship come up, and then a lot of issues within the dynamics community come up. Same thing on the other side. A female essence body who has a wounded male attributes within themselves, often connected to the father, and with the male often connected to the mother, then the wounded aspects themselves create the suppression, right, of their inner feminine traits, the true desire to be in that receptive mode as a feminine, to be taken care of in many ways by the male-bodied individuals within the community. And on the other end, where the male can actually be a provider, the male can be the giver that they naturally want to be. They can be the one that brings the action within the community, the necessary action, especially in these times, for the females and the children within the community. This is a natural tendency. This is not something that needs to be diminished in our society. So when there's proper healing that's been done, then this is where real polarity attraction can actually occur. So this is actually where we have better intimate partnerships and relationships, because the females who are in alignment with the feminine essence can truly be that feminine essence with no guilt. They can be in that place of deep receptivity, and they can receive the men within the community who are there in a place of giving themselves and delivering their actions that they so desperately want to be delivering, because that's a natural mechanism within them to take that action, right? So this is a very important thing in these times, because to be honest, in my view, a lot of the men need to step up. A lot of the men who are in places where they have knowledge or wisdom, or they have energy to carry through actions within communities, there is a requirement for men to be moving through a lot of these beta male tendencies, and acting in true authenticity, true vulnerability, which is just acting authentically, not sitting around talking about emotions all day, which men don't truly desire to do. We only desire to do a little bit because we've never done it. But now there's this huge uprising of like love languages for men, or men being more vulnerable and all this, and again it becomes another extreme, right, where we make beta men out of males that actually we very desperately need the alpha male energy at this time, in the smallest of ways, not necessarily some big like Braveheart spectacle, but just in the simplest of ways within our community. So the men in this call, all of us, we're naturally called in the responsibility to take action for our community, for those who we love, are those who are dependents on us, those who are more vulnerable. Yes, women and children naturally would be in times where there's lots of tyranny and oppression. With the feminine essence, or female led beings, your wisdom, right, your receptivity, your ability to actually be open to receive that energy, and be willing to honor that energy in the men who are able to give that in a certain way. And this doesn't mean partnership or romantic or anything. This is just basic community dynamics that we very, very, quite frankly, we've lost in our society. Our communities, the strength of them are in all these different kind of combinations now, right? So community can just be two or more people, obviously, but I think this is an important message right now, and especially again over this next year, where boots on the ground action is certainly going to be required. It already is required. We're already seeing it, and we're not going to be saved by the Pleiadians, or we're not going to be saved by some magical I don't know, court case that's being done right now, or Trump somehow, some master plan under the workings. They're doing all these things. I'm not putting any emphasis on any of these things, because although they all are part of the puzzle, they're not going to save us from our own misery and our own delusions, right? So so I think that's an important message. It's not something I've talked about much, but I probably will start more and more, because it's just a practical thing. You know what I mean? Like, we're in a time where we need to take practical actions in our own life and within our communities. And part of that is just living our natural physiology, living our natural essence, and not feeling guilted or shamed to live that, right? Just be that, right? And there is truth to the fact that we're all balancing these energies within ourselves. But in my view, there's three sexes. There's a male sex, female sex, and an androgynous sex. There's three. And that's been in all of the ancient teachings. That's been in many of the universal teachings for millions of years. Now we somehow have a billion different sexes, and we were mixed up, confused on all these different combinations of them. And that just creates such unnecessary conversations, right? Especially in times where, you know, we best just be taking action, right? Thanks, man. How to discern between genuine true desires and the shiny new object desires? Well, again, go back to the exercise we started with today. I think you came in a bit late, but you know, when we just come into the silence of tuning in, what is necessary, you know, what is most loud in my field of view right now, right? Most loud being like, what's holding most space that you can't avoid? Doesn't matter what you do, you can't avoid it. It's right there. You know, talk to this person, do this, do that, do that. But it's a lot of times not even doing, it's just being with life and not allowing, just seeing the spontaneity of things that guide the path already. There's your non-shiny object, right? It's very simple in my view. It's just that we don't trust in ourselves, because trust often comes after feeling the pains of ourselves, right? You have to earn your own trust back. Think about that. If we've broken trust in a relationship, we have to earn the trust back by feeling the pain of regret, guilt, shame. Can't run from it. So in the same way with ourselves, if we have broken trust with ourselves, with our body, the only way we're going to develop trust to listen, to actually have the messaging of ourselves to guide us in every moment, to tell us exactly what it is that we need to do in any one particular time. The only way that that is going to come online in a more consistent way is if we feel through our own distrust in ourselves, and we start to build that back again. That's not going to happen overnight, right? That happens through moment to moment action and redeveloping, you know, and then you may fuck it up and you may do whatever, and it's okay. And then you keep coming back, and then you keep coming back. And some of us may have a much longer route than others in that regard. Some of us may have really got off the deep end. Some of us maybe not, whatever. But it doesn't matter. It does matter that we are redeveloping a sense of trust in ourselves. And that comes through facing the pains that we've caused. We went in that on Monday. We have to face the consequences of our actions. And that's, there's no shiny way of putting it. There's a good way of looking at it, right? When the shiny objects paint the picture that your 12-strand DNA is coming in the mail, you know. Order my program, here's your 12-strand DNA, you know what I mean? Let me mail it to you with a certificate. Oh man. What's the third sex? Androgynous. There are beings who don't identify with male or female in their soul essence, we all technically, we're all from that, right? The higher versions of our soul essence are going to be androgynous. Many of the higher races are androgynous by nature. All of the whole race is androgynous by nature. It's only in the lower dimensions, like dimensions, I think 7 down or 9 down, that you're starting to have more of the I think it's 6, 7, that you have more of the gender polarities, right? So yeah, when you deal with things like twin flames and stuff, the twin flame dynamic, all of that is just the, you know, you're coming in contact with the aspect of yourself, or a aspect of yourself, depending on which level you're looking at it from, that has the corresponding sexual polarity, that in the unification of the two of you, that's what brings back the androgynous knowing, you know, that inner knowing of the balance within. But you don't need a twin for that, though. You know, it can happen, but you can come back into that healing yourself. alone. Yeah, if there's any other questions, comments on these topics, feel free to share, or just, yeah, anything you else want to share. Just gonna get a couple links here.
I wanted to say something about the thing you said about masculine and feminine, because
Sure.
that's something that was also that I also relate to on my path, that I have like periods that I'm more masculine and periods that I'm like too extreme and then more feminine. And it's funny because every time I go to such a phase, it helps the integration of the other side. So like the first year of my spiritual path that I really took off was like really concentration practice, like laser, until I got to my Kundalini. And after my Kundalini, it was more like surrendering. I couldn't, every attempt to do or like control my attention would just like fuck everything up. So I had to, I really had to switch to this surrendering completely every moment. And what happened, and that's kind of more like a way more like a feminine, soft energy. And what happened is, because of that, I became more masculine. Yeah.
Feel you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel like there's like, at least in my path, and I feel like probably multiple people have that you go to sides a little bit and then it will be balanced out more and more. And I feel like when both sides are healed, you naturally will lean towards your own sex.
Yeah.
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 But I feel like for even, yeah. So I feel like it can be beneficial for men to have like a feminine phase, or for women to have like a masculine phase. But I feel it's not to be, in my view, to be to stay in. It's to go through, to transcend, and eventually, yeah, come back to yourself. But I feel like what I wanted to add is that I feel like when you like force a man to be feminine with his emotions, or you force a woman to be no, I mean the other side. Both sides. If you force like a woman to be masculine or feminine, you'll just keep holding on to like a certain ideal, and you will miss the integration. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great point, man. I mean, that's the key, right? Is like when we're not holding to the ideals or expectations, or the guilt trip was something,
Yeah.
to become something. And I totally agree. And that's the thing, like when the healing pops off, the oscillation of the feminine and masculine tendencies will just naturally occur. That's the rebalancing, like you're saying, right? And then as that rebalancing happens, there's a natural emanation of the soul being that will
Yeah.
be sometimes one or the other, right? And I'm definitely a purveyor of respecting the bodies that we're in. If we're in a physiological male or female body, then I don't think we got it wrong. I feel like there's a lot of confusion around, so many things with it that can be nullified, right? But that's a great point. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Go.
can continue. Sorry.
I wanted to add one more thing, and I feel like what's happening in the world is we're also with we're like forcing everything to be equal. I feel like that's like this. How would I say that? Instead of having people integrate all the energies, we're trying to force these ideals through force. And I feel that's what's happening with the gender, with the sexes, with the opposites. We're like really forcing people to be like man's to be woman and woman to be man, and I feel like, and that adds up to the manipulation of like trying to control everything, also like our bodies, and like with the vaccines, and we don't want to go, we want to have this ideals, this perfections right away, instead of doing, instead of trusting or nature and the energies, and see where that will lead us. Because where that will lead us, I feel like that will be an authentic, working, healthy ecosystem, instead of clinging to this, oh, it should be like this or it should be like that, and that's just control of that.
Nice, Hans. Yeah, beautifully put. Beautifully put. Thanks, man. Viviana, you have something to share?
Yeah, my internet connection is a bit broken, but hope you can hear me. It really resonates what you share with the balance of masculine, feminine, everything. And I experienced a lot of painful relationships, and I see my healing journey with that. It's kind of getting better, but still, I see how I have this intense trust issue with the masculine and with God, basically, and also my father. But it's like, it feels like this healing is never going to end, or like, do you have a shortcut? Like, basically, like, how can I rebuild trust in others and myself? Because I know that this is the baseline, but still there's like, I perceive so many energies, and then I don't know what's my projection and what I perceive of someone else. And I don't know if this question is clear, but you can probably feel it.
Yeah, it's definitely clear. I mean, it's kind of a topic I've been circulating with, and it was the reason why I set up this next level of the detox course, the freedom course, because the relationship dynamic when it comes to trauma is pretty much where everything stems back from, right? Like every trauma we could possibly connect to in some way connects with some other being. So whether that's the archetype of the father or the mother or the friend or the intimate partner or the sibling, the authority, the boss, I mean, there's all these different archetypes, but in my view, it comes back to these core 5. So, we're going to be getting into all that, but like, what's the direct path here when it comes to feeling into what we feel like we are lacking or not getting from another? Well, the quickest way is to be willing to give that in which we think is lacking from being given from some other, right? Because there is no other, there is no perceivable world. That's all just a makeup of our own projection that we, yes, are co-creating with other individualized expressions. But the reason why we've been brought together with these other individualized expressions is because it's a match to our frequency. It's a match to our oscillation. It's a match to what we are also healing. So that's all for me, has always been the quickest way to take care of, not take care of, but to really engage these things, is that if there's something that I'm projecting that someone else is not giving to me, or that I am essentially trying to control so that it does feel like they're giving something to me, whether that's approval, whether that's trust, whether that's acknowledgement, whether that's love, or whatever, it all comes back really to love, truly. Well, then it means that I'm not giving it. I have to be the one first to be willing to give it, because the way that the reality of the fractal universe works is that whatever energy that we put out is going to come back to us exponentially, generally like 3 times or more, 3.5 times, right? So whatever it is that is not perceivably coming in some form. Well, the only reason it's not perceivably coming in some form is because every time we've given the opportunity to give that exact same thing, we held back a bit, or not fully committed, or not willing to move forward in that regard. And so it fractals in the same way. Money is a perfect way to look at this, right? Like if anyone's having the troubles with money, well, it's so easy to look at. It's like, well, in the times that you're observing someone being cheap with you, well, it's likely you were just cheap quite soon before that, you know. In the times in which you're thinking that the world, you know, only has, you know, only people with money are free, well then, yeah, of course, you know, every time, you know, you're sensed with the sense of not having money, you think, well, I'm not free, I can't do what I want. And it's always the same kind of archetypes that will play themselves out. So when we start to recognize that every opportunity we have to fractalize our actions, meaning just do what's right, do what feels most open, most loving, most compassionate, most respectful, most integral, well, then that ripples back and we get exactly that. We get exactly that and more from the rippling of the relationships. It doesn't mean you're going to get it in the exact relationship that you may be having the challenge on. That it may take time, but it's often a lot quicker than you may think, right? When you're willing to give what you think you're not getting, because it's the only reason you're feeling you're not getting because you're not giving it, right? It's not, there is really no difference between giving or getting. I'm just giving a practical example. Now, on the other note, we're going to get into this in the course, so I'm going to be putting the links in for the level 2, 1 and 2 that people can take a look at. But I'm also going to find the link here for the ebook that I have out. That's it's called Healing the Father Wound. So people have been asking me for me to write one for the mother and for all the relationships. That's why I've just put it together in this course coming up. But I would highly recommend actually both, because originally this was for a men's group, and people had some amazing experiences. A lot of men had some pretty remarkable healings with this practice and this article. So it can be applied for anybody, any, you know, female or male. So I'm going to put this link here. You guys can go and do that practice. It's such a profound process that technically is going to be the basis of what we're going to do in that upcoming course, but it can be done at any time. It's so simple, right? And it can be applied to pretty much every relationship as well. You know, no matter the dynamic, because what is it? What is all trauma? What is all cycling patterns? It's feeling things that we have not been willing to feel, and acting and taking the actions into the unknown while that feeling is present. You know what I mean? Right? Like, because when we're stepping into the unknown, taking actions that we have not taken before, there always is going to be a feeling of uncomfortable nature. It's like going into a cold pool, taking a cold shower. It doesn't matter if you're Michael Phelps. Like, you can be the friggin' Olympian of Olympians in swimming. Every time you go into the cold water, you are shocked. You feel the uncomfortable nature. There's no avoiding it. So this is the same when it comes to, you know, creating new neural pathways or new navigation of action that is not dependent on trauma wounds, trauma bonding, you know, cycles of the same patterns just to keep a sense of safety, right? So this doesn't have to be one big action. It actually can be very small, very methodical. But this process that I've linked here, I mean, it's everything, right? I'll share a small story too. I remember actually in the middle of this pandemic thing, I was noticing a bit of lingering energy with my parents. You know, I've had 10 years since I really came out to them about this awakening stuff. And, you know, I was talking to them about Illuminati at Christmas dinner in 2011. And, you know, there's been a long route to kind of come to balance with my parents in a place of a deep peace with them. And, you know, this past few years has been like so peaceful, the best I've ever had in relationship with my parents. And not at all do we agree on, you know, all these different topics or whatever, not at all. But what we do agree on, and what I think everyone agrees on, is peace and acceptance. And that's what I noticed within my own self in this space, where there was still small tendencies of feeling the need to maybe, you know, teach something to my dad, or prove something in some way, you know, prove that, oh, I know something about health, or you should listen to me, or even in the most subtle of ways, not even really that drastic. And it was so clear to me that even in that, after all this work, there was still these layers of self-acceptance, right? Coming into a true, total self-acceptance of myself, because that's all it is. If I have come to completely and totally accept myself in every possible crevice of what that means, then why would I ever feel any need to teach my dad something or prove him something or you know, have him acknowledge me in some way? These are all icing on the cake. It's nice when the parents want to listen, or you know, but that's not a necessity. There's no charge behind that. And that's very much what I feel nowadays. And it took that moment to kind of click, right, where I was like, oh yeah, you know, there was a lacking of a true self-acceptance and embodiment of that self-acceptance, right? And that's why the trauma work is so important, because it can take a long time for those things to integrate, even post awakening or post realization of non-dual states or anything like this, right? So I hope that makes sense, Viviana. There's a couple of things there, but I would really recommend that one ebook there. Everyone, I would recommend doing that.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome. But yeah, but I mean, what a common topic, you know, for the feminine and for females in regards to the trusting of the masculine energy. And I mean, that's so much what is fueled the movement of women looking to become, you know, independent and free and empowered, which are all like amazing things. Every human on the planet should be this. Every human on the planet is to have, it has that as their birthright. But again, if it's coming from a place of trauma, if it's coming from a place of to get back, or to show, to prove, to present, you know, to you know, all these different kind of little tinges that we kind of put under, but they still come out, you know, maybe at times. That's where we just have to take an honest look. As long as we're always willing to be honest, then it doesn't matter, because we're not perfect. None of us are perfect. We're all still evolving and, you know, going through this journey. I mean, the greatest of masters on the planet that have been in our history in the past are reincarnated again, doing this with us, because they also have things to heal. So don't get it twisted that there's these perfect beings out in the clouds, just, you know, hovering around in their little clouds of perfection. No, it's that we're all in it. So as long as we're just honest with that fact, right? And I think, I mean, I feel everyone here is being honest in so many ways, right? Just showing up for things like this is being honest, because you're not, you know, you don't think, oh, I'm just going to do it alone, or I'm too good for this, or, you know, yada, 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 right? That's humility, you know, that's true humility, which is one of the subsets of virtue 13, Yume Zun, in the Kailonic tradition, right? The highest of virtues, and the subset description, one of those is humility, because humility is eternal. It's you can never be humble enough. That's why I mentioned the whole perfect in the clouds, because oh boy, do we know the perfect in the cloud beings that have fallen from grace in our history, right? And so we always have to be humble, right? Always have to be humble. Yep. Wow, we're really going off today. It's been a while, so well, it's only been 2 weeks. Jeez. That's what happens when you triple air sign, you know, doesn't do a session for a week. Yeah, so just a review, like those links that are there. Level 1 purification detox course is available. All the recordings are there, even though we're pretty much done. But I mean, it's an ongoing process. And then level 2, which we're going to start it probably the 31st. So you guys have some time to kind of feel into that one. But yeah, that'll be really, really nice. I mean, I've done energy work, emotional healing, trauma healing, NLP, all that for so many years. And I found the technique that I finally came into, which is a combination of so many, is probably one of the most effective techniques I've ever seen in regards to trauma healing, emotional work, even advanced levels of psychic surgery, energetic healing. And I was kind of doing it last night. I had a really interesting experience last night. I hadn't had it in a while, but this has happened to me many times, where maybe people can relate, but basically where my whole psyche consciousness basically goes into this really intense, like slow motion, and my whole body slows down. Every aspect of time goes down. I can basically speed it up or slow it down. That's basically what happens, as slow as I want or as fast as I want. And so what I was doing, I probably went at least an hour until I fell asleep, but basically was going through all the layers of my anatomy as slow as I possibly can, like so patient, and healing everything that I could, any layer of buildup or energy that I felt in as many layers as I could go, I was able to do. And it was being done in this space where it was like time. It was like aeons worth of, you know, healing done in you know, in an hour or something like this, right? And so yeah, so that's kind of the beauty of this type of method, because you can start to develop that skill set, because it is a skill set. And when it comes to trauma healing, you know, you can develop almost like a laser-like surgery skill set, you know, where you become your own psychic surgeon, and you can identify things and work on things. It takes a while to develop, you know, to be able to do things more like, say, physical things, like, say, a tumor or something like that could take a while to be able to develop the ability to, say, like, shrink a tumor or heal something physically. But the principles and the steps are being laid out with this process. So we're going to get into that, and I do that one-on-one too. But like I said, I haven't done the energy work with people anymore, because you start taking on people's energy. So it's better just to learn it yourself and then be able to do it on yourself. It's not a good time. It's not a good time in our history to be doing energy work with people in general. That's a whole other topic, but yeah, it's kind of dangerous, to be honest. So yeah, okay. Well, I feel good. I mean, if there's anything else, maybe we can discuss it, but I feel good with that. If you want to donate for today, feel free. No obligation, but I'll put it there. I have to remind myself. I just say these words. I told someone recently, like, if I didn't have to use any money, I could live without money. I feel confident that I could. So maybe I'll test it out. Okay. Who else is here? Green, Luke, Jason, Nick, Sal, nice. Yeah, some big topics today. Holy crap. Quite nice. I'll upload this one on YouTube. There's also a new podcast I just put up today. I should have delayed it. I have a lot of stuff coming out, but it's with my friend Ali. We usually have pretty funny pretty funny conversations. So I would go watch that. That's on my YouTube with Ali. He's a funny dude. You can go follow him too. Yeah, nice. Thanks for sharing, Viviana and Hans and everyone. Love you all. Just a note for the tomorrow. We're not going to do the Q&A tomorrow for the detox thing. We're going to move it to next Monday. I just want to give more time for people to get their questions together, and you know, you got a lot of recordings to watch and stuff anyway, so I'm not going to do it tomorrow. We'll do it next Monday as a bonus, but I'll update that in the Telegram. Deep love. See y'all. Enjoy the rest of your day. Okay, see you guys.